lifting each other off the ground. This is truth, this is elevation, sharing hope and inspiration podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Sharing Hope and Inspiration podcast. I am your host, Jim, and this is our founder and CEO, Denise Jackson. And this is a space where we turn stories of pain into beacons of resilience and healing. Today, we're joined by a special guest, Jeffery Roman. He's a courageous man who bravely chose to share his story with us today. In his journey of being a survivor, dealing with domestic abuse situations. And he is a reminder that abuse does not discriminate. But before we start, here's a little truth to a little stats. Nearly 1 in 10 men report experiencing rape, physical violence, and stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime, with around 1 in 7 men reporting severe physical violence. So that's just something to think about. But with that being said, Jeffery, thank you for joining us today. Everybody give it up for Jeffery for being so courageous to join us today.
Thank
And
you,
thank you for
Jeffrey.
trusting us
Thank
with
you
your
for having
story.
me.
Yeah, thank you for trusting us with your story. This is something we don't often hear about when it comes to domestic violence. Normally, they always look at the women's perspective, but we never get the male's perspective. So we really thank you for stepping up and sharing your journey with us. But before we start, outside of your domestic situation, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Jeffrey again. A native Atlantan, born and raised. I'm a Grady baby, as I like to share. Atlanta, Georgia is home, and I'm very proud of that. Um, I've worked in the field of public health for almost the last 20 plus years, actually closer to 30. A lot of that mostly being within the space of HIV/AIDS prevention. I've worked for the state of Georgia, done contracts for the federal government, including the CDC. And I worked at Emory University for a little while as a researcher. So I kind of covered the waterfront a little bit. I currently am now the director of programs at a Vision for Hope in College Park, Georgia. And that's pretty much. I mean, I love what I do. I believe in helping people and hopefully being able to share knowledge that will be able to help and empower. And that also included sharing some of my personal stuff, which is why I'm here.
Well, thank you so
Amazing.
much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right. So let me ask you, what inspired you to speak to us today?
Well, first of all,
Besides us stalking you and telling you got to do it.
well, I was gonna say first of all because Denise asked me, so I had to say yes.
Thank you,
Can't say no
Jeffrey.
to Denise. But no, I after going through what I went through, the ordeal of going through the domestic violence and coming out on the other side of it, the thing that I realized was no one that looked like me in the sense of identifying as male was sharing their stories. I didn't hear anything in the spaces when I even began to look for resources. There was it was very female centered, which is understandable for a lot of reasons, and all the obvious reasons. But just after going through and experiencing it as someone that had spent my entire career connecting people to resources, I connected people to HIV care. I got people, access to medications and things like that. But when it came to this space, it was harder to navigate. And I was like, it shouldn't be that way. And after what I went through and just the isolation of going through that, and for me as someone that is quite resourceful, like I know how to find a resource. I'm that person. I will get on Google, I will make a phone call, I will do what I need to do to get connected. And I was like, if it's this difficult for me, then what does that say for the other people that maybe don't have access to those resources that even I have?
Right.
All right. Well, what was your first experience or sign that something in your relationship was unhealthy?
It was interesting. So, my situation, it wasn't really until I noticed it. It wasn't until about a year in,
Mm-hmm.
and it started with very minor things, like there's always conflict in a relationship. So, and ironically, there was not a lot of conflict in this relationship initially. What actually happened was, so I met someone here. We dated for a very short period of time. And he proposed, and we got married pretty much within the span of a year.
Mm-hmm.
Within that year, he got an offer to relocate from Atlanta to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, for a fellowship to pay for his secondary degree, his master's degree. And being the good spouse, it was just like, okay, well, if this is where we're going with Pittsburgh, it is. And when we got to Pittsburgh, within a matter of maybe even a week, it didn't take long. I began to just notice that it was little things, like there was a lack of affection that began to occur. There was a lot more scrutiny that
Mm-hmm.
began to occur. And it started off very little. And then me being, someone that yet again is plugged in, I went through all it could be me, not him. We just relocated. I just got married. I had never lived away that far from my family, and my friends and my support system. So I'm thinking, I legitimately just could be feeling some stuff, So I just kind of began to go through my own process of, let me find me a therapist. Let me go through the things that I know that were healthy and helpful for me. But things didn't get better, and they actually started to get worse. And it just began to slowly deteriorate. And then the kicker was, we had come home for a visit over Labor Day weekend. House in the Park is a huge thing here every year, and we
Oh,
were at House in the Park. And we went and enjoyed some friends and had a good time. And we got in the car and we had a basic conversation. It wasn't anything combative. We was just kind of talking, and he made a statement, and I disagreed with his statement. And before I realized what had occurred, as he is driving, we're driving up 85. We're now getting ready to make our way back to Pittsburgh driving. He puts one hand on the wheel and he takes his other hand and literally grabs me by my neck and
oh
starts to choke
wow.
me. And I'm like literally like trying to like forcefully get his hands off of me, because I'm this point, I'm like in shock. I can't breathe. It's painful, just the whole nine.
Right.
And it literally took me grabbing something that was on the floor and literally hitting him for him to let me go.
Oh
And
While
wow.
y'all
it was
driving.
while he's driving, that was mindful. It was like all this and did not miss a beat. And I was in shock, because it was like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
And on that drive back to Pittsburgh, I began to see and realize that, yeah, I was not with the person that I thought I had married and that I was with. Immediately, he went into spin mode. It was really interesting because,
Okay.
he knew that at some point I probably was going to share this with someone. So
Mm-hmm.
before we could even get halfway up the road, when we pull over, I get out of the car. I'm visibly kind of shaking. Let me get me something to drink. Just kind of pull myself together, and I get in the car, and he's talking to a friend of his on the phone and explaining to them already that we had had an encounter.
Mm-hmm.
And that was his wording for it. But
I
it
have a
was, yeah,
Yeah.
but he was already spinning it like, well, this had happened, and it was a fault thing. It was like he was trying to already buy this. Well, before you hear the story from him, I'm going to give you my side so you
Right.
can understand that, I'm really the good guy here.
Wow.
And so he would not be vilified. And I'm sitting up here saying, like, this literally just happened. What are we doing here? Like,
Yeah.
and I noticed that became a pattern. Every time there was an incident, it was always incident. Let me spin. Let me reach out to someone in the support system, whether it was his or mine, so that he could kind of preempt anything that I would say or
Yeah.
share.
So did you in the process of that, did you recognize it as being abuse?
In that moment, I thought it was a moment. I had
Okay.
that. Yet again, we make excuses for the people we love, and I was no different. And I made the excuse, well, he's under stress. We just moved. That I went through every dynamic in my head, other than this is who he is, because in my head, this is not the man. Yet again, I'm married. This is not the person that I've now spent a year getting to know, to the point that I was willing to walk down the aisle with this person and move halfway across the country with. It wasn't until I began to notice that it was a systematic kind of thing that began to happen. He started to alienate affection. He started to try to isolate me. I noticed, because
Yeah.
yet again, I'm in Pittsburgh. I don't know anybody. But even like, I would have my phone next to me, say if I was sleeping, and I would wake up and my phone wouldn't be there. And his thing would be, oh, I took the phone while you were sleeping so it wouldn't wake you up. But what I didn't know was that he was answering my phone and telling people, oh, well, he's not available, or he's sick, or some reason why I couldn't talk to them. And it would and this happened multiple times. And I didn't find out a lot of this, actually, ironically, until after literally everything had hit the fan. Like, it wasn't until much later that I began to put the pieces together, and family and friends began to tell me, oh yeah, we would call you all the time. And he would say you wasn't available, or you weren't feeling well. And I was like, huh?
Oh, wow.
Like, that was that. But it was for me, I began to see that it was very planned. It was
Mhm.
very intentional. I often use the word, like, I literally realized, from my own training, and I'll say this, and it could be controversial, but I literally at that point was like, I married a sociopath. Like, that was because I knew clinically what to look for. I'd studied and all this. My
Mhm.
background was sociology and psychology, so I know what I'm looking at, you know. But and as I began to then look at this gauge and really say, okay, like, it was just, it began as little things, and then definitely systematically just built up to a point where, it was just everything and anything that was not about him, he figured
Mhm.
out a way to cut off. So I felt
Oh,
literally
wow.
like it was just me and him, and even that's the way he would word it a lot of times, even after we would have these moments, and it was always, but I love you. They don't love you. Your family doesn't love you. Everybody that you've ever been with is taking advantage of you. They lean on you too much. They do this. He was always in the way that he framed it to me, my protector. And he
That's how they
definitely wasn't
work.
that.
As I was say,
That's how
it's
they work.
and when we say gender, domestic violence knows no genders, because we've heard these same phrases used from our female counterparts. That's crazy to me. That's
Yeah, I
crazy.
mean, and it was wild because, yet again, as someone, I had worked in a space where, yeah, I'd worked for several agencies, but I've had to talk to women in crisis, and and yet again, you hear the language and what they were saying or whatever, and it was just like I began to realize, oh my God, I'm using the same language. That was really, I think, my wake up call.
Yeah.
It was towards the end, about a year into this, when I ended up, we had a bad blow up. I had just gotten out of the hospital, from dealing with some minor things, and just was not feeling well, and whatever. And he attacked me. And I ended up in the hospital again, right after being in the hospital. And I had the social worker come in. I always say, give me the talk. you know do you have a safe place to go talk, and are there anybody you can trust? And I'm sitting up here like, wow, how did we get here? Because I've had this talk with then other, at that point, females, and I had never had that conversation with a man. So I felt at that point also very like, it was very foreign, because it was like, as a man, this felt very weird for me to
Yeah.
be sitting on this other side of this table and having to have that talk with a woman, ironically, who, in a lot of ways, and also feeling very judged in that.
So was that having to speak in reference to what you were going through? Was that one of the challenges you had to face as far as speaking out and someone believing you and not just listening to you, but hearing what you're saying?
I don't think for me it was about believing. For me, I'll say for me it was even the sharing piece.
Okay.
I went through the guilt and the shame piece of it. I did. Like,
Mhm.
I remember I had a friend who reached out to me, and he knew me enough to know that something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt so, I don't even know. I mean, it was guilt, it was shame, it was, how could this happen to me of all people?
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to be quote unquote so connected and know so much and so empowered. How did you then end up in this space? And for as we all do, for keeping up appearances, I didn't share because
Right.
I felt like I had let myself down. I had disappointed. I had a lot riding on this relationship. I got married when it wasn't legal still. So, this idea of I was kind of went and bucked the process, and went out and did this thing. And from a standpoint of, if this fails now, it blows up in my face, which is what a lot of people said it would do, but not for that reason. That was other stuff. But just trying to keep up that appearance for a while was a big part of it. But then it was the other thing of, how do you tell your friends or people that you care about that you're going through this? And I thank God for, I had a really good friend in Savannah, and he just called one day very randomly, and he knew enough to know something was wrong. And he just said to me, he said, I don't know what's wrong. He said, but let me be clear about something. He said, you owe nobody any explanations, and you have nothing to prove. And I'm in this car, like he had gone into the store, I think, and I'm in a car waiting on him to come out, and I'm just bawling at this point because my friend knew I was hurt, but he didn't know even how to broker that conversation.
Right. I think for men, it's the embarrassment of it all. I
It
think that's
is.
it's the embarrassment of it all because I have not dealt with many men, but the ones that I have dealt with, them just talking to me, I can sense a feel of embarrassment because here I am talking to a woman about what I'm going through. And I'm supposed to be the protector. I'm supposed to be doing this. And I think it, and when I say to them, I understand, you know, this thing is genderless. Like it has no gender, it does not discriminate. It could happen to you, to me, to him, to her. So let's do what we must do to make it better for you. So it's like you have to really comfort a man and have them to understand that I got you. It's okay.
No,
So I
but
think,
you're absolutely right. I remember afterwards, meaning when I had gotten, and I was over after I ended up in the hospital at the time. I was like, I'm not going to be a statistic. I was over it at that
Mhm.
point. Like, even to the point that I almost went into a homeless shelter just to not have to be near him.
Mm.
And because we were at this point getting ready to transition back to Atlanta. For him, yet again, the keeping up appearances is he knew if he got back to Atlanta and did not have me in tow, there were going to be a lot of questions.
Correct.
So he literally convinced me to get in a car with him and trust him to ride 12 hours back home. And during that time, I literally will never forget it. I rode down, from Pittsburgh to Atlanta with a baseball bat in my hand. And I
Wow.
literally was like, if you flinch at me the wrong way, I'm going to knock you upside your head. Like, I got to that
Mhm.
space of it. But it was when I got back and I did start to then say, well, let me work my support systems and work what I knew. And ironically, I have to say, even within, a lot of people feel like there's a level, I think, of acceptance in the gay community that even I thought, well, other gay men will not judge me the same way as you said a heterosexual woman would. And I found
Mhm.
it was harsher. It was
Mhm.
really much harsher. I remember just kind of getting to get my life back. And, I met somebody online and we was chatting and, going through the usual, let's get to know you kind of thing. And then of course he asked about my previous relationship, and I was very transparent that it had been very abusive. And I never will forget, he said to me, um, one, it was, what did I do?
Oh.
Which I find, and I know that happens to women often, like you had
Mhm.
to have done something to put this person in that space. And then it was that almost like, but you're a man, you should have been able to, you should have been able to fight or protect yourself.
Correct.
And the judgment that I felt in that moment was, I think, a lot harsher for me than what I had experienced talking to that female counselor in that hospital that night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jim, you got anything?
This crazy. I'm still stuck on you driving back with the baseball bat. Like,
And it was one of those things that, as I said, it was definitely at that point I was definitely in full fight mode. But at this time, also from a transparency standpoint, I had been about when we met, I had been recently diagnosed with having PTSD, and this was after working in the space of HIV and AIDS for over 15 years. I'm very open with the fact that I live with HIV. I've lived with HIV for 30 years. But the trauma of working in the HIV space and losing friends and family and just other things that put me in a really crazy, and working in the field, like I was completely burnt out and literally had gotten a full diagnosis of PTSD. And even when we were talking marriage, I remember saying, hey, yet again, Jeff being healthy, Jeff, let's go talk to a counselor, because I don't know now what this looks like in the sense of marrying someone, going through this new traumatic space and figuring all this out. And I did the let's do the premarital counseling thing, which yet again, I came out of my pocket and paid for. And I never will forget, this goes to how they sell themselves. So that was, I realized for him, an end that I did not realize was an end, because they always will center and they will attach to something that they feel like you need in the moment, I found out. And for him at that moment, he knew in some ways I kind of did need a protector and someone to have my back, because I was in a crazy space. And I remember we went to talk to, and yet again, a wonderful, dynamic African-American therapist. She was amazing. Like, she put it all on the table. She was like, look, this is what your life is going to look like. You're going to have to kind of put some things back together. And if you're going to get married, and she like literally asked him, are you going to be able to marry this man and support him? And he gave the best speech that I've ever heard outside of an Academy Award. But this is going to be my husband, and I'm going to be there and have his back. And, I'm there, and like this whole, like, I'm all in thing. And it was just really weird for me. But yet again, he turned around later and weaponized those same things against me.
I was just about to say that. He took that and wow.
He turned around
it's crazy to me.
And weaponized that, even down to the point of, after the attack, and this also happens with men, which I found out, I called the police, because at this point, I literally had to force him out of our apartment, lock the door, because he literally threw me through a wall. It got bad. I called in the police. They greet him downstairs. He doesn't have a scratch on him, mind you. I'm pretty banged up. They gave us the spiel of, well, because you're two men, this idea that we both had to be perpetrators here somehow. So literally, these white policemen in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, told me that I had two choices. I could push the idea of having him charged, but they were going to charge me, meaning that I wasn't going to be able to go to the hospital. Correct. Or I could go to the hospital and basically shut up.
So who do you go for help when you facing stuff like that?
It wasn't like I literally, and it was crazy. So and this, like I said, yet again, the manipulation. So during that process, he had taken my cell phone, because he was real big on that phone. He knew if I had my phone, I had connection. He took my phone, he took my wallet, just things that he knew I would need in order to. So it was almost that two thing of, you're going to have to depend on me in some shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah.
And I had to force the police to make him give me, because I was like, look, I'm here to go to the hospital. He has my wallet and my phone. He was on my phone at the time. Yet again, police are there. We just had this incident doing the spin thing again. He had called somebody else, and, blah, 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 blah. Me and Jeff just had an incident, and the police are here. And it was always, for him, that was how he covered his behind. We had his one of his godchildren and a friend staying with us, two young boys, whatever, and one of them was there during the attack. I found out later on, after I left in the ambulance, he had him write a statement basically saying, like, I had been the perpetrator.
Oh my God.
And that I had been the one that had been the aggressor, so that if I ever decided to then go and even try to press charges, that he, quote unquote, had witnesses. So it was a very complex, very icky thing. And when you're dealing with that, and especially in a city like Pittsburgh, there was just not a lot of resources. that were tailored even towards people of color. Definitely as me as a gay black man living with HIV, just a lot of different things. And then to add the domestic violence piece on that, it was like, no, like the woman literally told me when she asked me if you have a safe place to go, it was, well, literally, like I said, she said, you can go to the homeless shelter, but she even said it out of her mouth. She said, I wouldn't send a dog there.
Wow.
She's like, there are no shelters in this city that house men. So my option was to go to this homeless shelter, which she even acknowledged wasn't safe, to sleep on the street, or to go back and face my attacker.
Mm.
And for me, luckily, I knew that, okay, at least if I get back to the house and I make it back to Georgia, I at least somewhat have a support system here, i.e., this is where my family is, this is where my friends are. And even that, ironically, after all of that happened, even that got put to the test, because when we got back here, yet again, because of the spitting that had already occurred, I remember going to my aunt and she, not really wanting to share what had happened, but just her knowing I didn't want to talk to him and communicate with him, not knowing that he had already told them that we had this moment and like I had attacked him and it was this whole thing and whatever. And it wasn't until a year later I found out he had even had this conversation. This is with my family, not his.
Oh, wow.
And I literally had to go off on my family because I was like, in all the spaces, I'm somebody that I live my life very out loud. My family knows the people that I've dated. I've never hid those kind of things. My family's been around friends. So I'm like, you've never had anyone come and tell you I've ever put my hands on them. But y'all would believe him. And the whole thing that they finally admitted was, well, because he would tell us what happened and you wouldn't. And I was like, so I had to bear this pain for y'all to feel like y'all had the dirt or the tea, and I told him, I said, I wasn't up for being entertainment or for gossip at that moment.
Right.
I say, but the fact that I chose to, in some ways, even with him, like I tell people, I don't mention his name. I don't talk about him when I talk publicly. That's, this is my story and it's not about him. I know he's not in Georgia anymore and that's fine, but we've had some mutual friends or whatever it is, what it is, that have talked about the fact that he now knows that I've been doing this kind of thing and talking out publicly, about it. But even in that, like he lied to a friend of mine and told them, well, I talk about being married. I've only been married once. And the friend asked him, well, Jeff's only been married once. And he said this happened with his ex-husband. So putting one and one together and getting two. And he literally tried to convince the friend, like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, and I was just like, well, what did you tell him? He said, I finally told him. He said, I know Jeff enough to know that you don't lie. But just really, really going into those kind of scenarios where now that I'm home and I'm thinking I'm back safe, now as I'm trying to reconnect and get resettled, I'm also now in some ways having to defend my name and my integrity to say, hey, I need some help, and not even saying everything that happened, but things, I let them know things got bad. The shit hit the fan. And literally still having people, because the story had already been spun to them, having their thoughts and opinions about it. And it wasn't until much later people coming forward and saying, okay, well, we finally get it. But even family going through that yet again, but you're a man.
Right.
That doesn't happen to men. They
don't feel like it happened to men. Like they really don't, but it does.
It does.
And they also, and as I say, I think especially with family coming from a black family from the South, that further stigma of it being a man in a relationship with a man, that carried a lot of that weight because, they yet again are still unpacking that stuff in their own way. So that came with its own, yet again, level of stigma,
right.
And so, it just really, it spiraled. And it was like I told people, although we were together physically 2 years, it took me a long time to really feel like I had really gotten back grounded and back to a space where I even felt safe again.
I mean, he infiltrated every part of your life. Your family, your friends, like so for you to even try to reclaim any part of that back, that speaks volumes. Because I'm just, as you're talking, I'm like, you were living and married to a monster.
It was that, like, and it was funny because I think the thing that people don't see with any type of a predator in this way is the piece of it is that they're a monster with you, but they're so charming with everybody else.
Yes.
They
That's
will
that's the real
charm.
scary part.
They will
Yeah.
charm. Like it was crazy. So I did follow up with the police in Pittsburgh. I actually had those two officers put on desk duty because
As you
I
should
pushed
have.
it.
As you should
I,
have.
I pushed it because I was just like, and I like yet again, that's the advocate in me. I was like, I will not be victimized further by your police department.
Hmm.
And in order for him not to get charged, they basically gave him an option of going to see a therapist. Fine. He and my thing is at this point I'm done. So that's your process. You go, but as part of the process, they was like, well, we need you to do one session with him. And he had gone in and I have to preface this was a black female therapist that seemed very capable of what she did, in the sense of her, but she told me that, the problem wasn't that, he was violent. It was I hadn't shown him enough affection and I needed to be more affectionate with him. And I went back and told my therapist what she
What?
said. And she was like, wait a minute. She told what? She told you to be affectionate with somebody that had done this type of abuse to you. I said, yeah. She said that was the problem. I
No, I
I
would have to
just
call
I
the
had
No,
not
police.
shown him
no.
enough
Where she get her
affection,
where she get her license from?
and it was crazy. So my therapist, it was funny because she was a I love her. She was a very robust white lesbian, and so she was one of those old school like I wanted to kick a door in kind of women, and she went and called her before the board.
Yeah, like
I
She
would
what?
she
I would
did.
call the board on her.
She
Yeah.
called her before the
That's
board
crazy.
because she was like, she says, you never in a situation where there's obviously domestic violence say that to somebody that's been
Right.
victimized.
That's crazy.
But that's how charming he was. Like yet again, he had convinced this woman that, no, no, no. And this is yet again trained professional. She's supposed to be able to see through these kind of things. So, and that's like I always tell people, they would always say, but he was so nice, you know, you
To
know,
you.
to
I was like,
to
to you.
you, and that's what I would have to say, to you. I said you didn't get, like I said, when we're public and it's one thing, and then you get behind closed doors, and you then get the physical aspect of it, or even just the verbal pieces that went with it, the
Right.
demeaning of it. And even in that, like I tell them, I say, on one hand, they tell you, how much everybody else, how much they love you, but behind closed doors, it's, you'll never be anything without me.
Mm.
No one will never. I remember literally the day that he attacked me. I'm literally on the ground, like in pain, and he takes the moment to bend down over me and says, "Nobody will ever love you." And I'm literally at this point, like I need to go to a hospital or something. And he looks at me. He says, "I'll take you when I get ready."
Mm.
And that clicked something in me because I literally had that. I guess it was the Tina Turner in the back of the limo moment because I was like, okay, if this how we going down fight. At that
Right.
moment, as bruised and as battered as I was like, no, this ain't how this get ready to play out. And it was literally me taking that power back because I was like, and that wasn't even I attacked. I was like, I'm getting ready to get up and call me a cab and take myself to the hospital. That's what triggered the attack because I was like, I'm not giving you power in order to tell me how I'm gonna now take care of myself. And that was like a no.
Right.
How
So
dare you
even
try to be responsible for yourself?
after you left the marriage and you had finally come to terms that you were in an abusive relationship, did it
Mhm.
affect you mentally?
Oh yeah. I tell people that kind of pain, it sticks with you. It has taken me. We were married in 2011, and by 2013, we were done.
Mm.
We and it is now what 2025, and it has taken me a whole lot of therapy, some good therapy, a whole lot of reclaiming my own narrative, you know but even now, like, I have triggers, in relationships. I'm very transparent with people. I'm like,
Mhm.
look, I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and on top of that, As a youth, I was a survivor of sexual assault, so I carried that double.
Yeah.
And so I have to navigate relationships very differently. And I tell people that, like, I'm unique and I'm special. So understand,
Right.
and I'm transparent. I'm like, look, there's some things you need to understand. Even, my current partner, we have to have those moments sometimes. I've been like, look, I'm triggered. So in order,
Too rough.
right, and I have to be very mindful of that because I will, not so much the fight and flight anymore, but I definitely in relationships will shut down at times. There are times that I don't want to be touched. I don't want to communicate. I just want to like literally ball up and just go in a hole. But I understand that for me, the thing I tell people was that the other side of that for me was that the reason why I continue to fight and go through the therapy and to get back to my new normal was because I said, if I don't, then he wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I always remember him leaning over me that day and saying to me, no one will ever love you. No one will ever be there the way that I was there for you. And me saying, no, you don't get to be the author of that for me. So
Right.
it almost antagonized me to fight even more harder to just
Yeah.
get back to, like I said, it's a new normal for me.
Because your power is your
Um,
power.
right.
Your
And even like
power
you
is
said,
your
in sharing the
power.
story, I went and I've done this one other time for when I first got back to Atlanta. I had a group of guys that did something very similar to what you do here, just about general issues impacting gay men. And I told them, I said, you guys need to do a show about same-sex domestic violence. And even when I said it, they was like, huh? Like, that's a thing?
Yes, it
you
is a
know,
thing.
You know
but
why
they
they
allowed
probably
me to
had that
come
reaction?
on and share my story. And it was very eye-opening. And I also have to say, as a preference too, as I began to share, and then I did begin to meet other men, I also did encounter even heterosexual men because this is not a gay thing.
Right.
I
It
It's
is
want to
not.
make
not,
sure that
that's
I'm
what I said, it's
clear
not a
about
good
that.
thing.
I have met heterosexual men that have gone through some very similar things. And yet again, it still is domestic violence at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And for the heterosexual men, they talk, like you said earlier, Denise, this idea that, you as the man in this relationship, how did you let a woman do that to
Exactly.
you? So
Exactly.
my straight brothers get it just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah.
So I get it, but also just I understood that there needed to be a narrative that was started about men.
Mm-hmm.
There needed to be more conversation that was had in these spaces
Yeah.
because yet again it happens all the time. Like I remember talking to one man and he literally said that, he had been in a situation where a woman had attacked him, and when the police came, they went to arrest him because it was the idea of him being the male, he obviously had to be the perpetrator. And I've heard that story many a times. In our community, as in the gay community, it was, idea of the masculine individual could be the perpetrator versus somebody that might be seen as more feminine.
Right. See,
So
that's
I yet
why.
again, you have to deal with those dynamics, even like
Mm-hmm.
a policeman coming in and literally that does not have any idea of what the community looks like or have their own biases, then coming in and making a judgment call to say who they're going to potentially remove, if anybody. Or like in my situation, do that whole, well, y'all are both men, y'all are obviously just fighting, we just gonna lock both of y'all up.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important that we need to bring awareness, to really bring awareness to raise the state. Because again, this is just not a female problem. It is not a female problem. Gay, straight men are being abused. They're
I
being
think for some of
abused.
us, I think when you asked early on about not knowing, I think, and this is the other caveat we have to, I think, discuss, especially in African American families. Some of us come from backgrounds and parents that are have those kind of dysfunctional relationships.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, as a child, as a young person, I watched my mother go through a very, very bad relationship with my stepfather, and for them, fighting was the regular. And it was like it didn't ever get labeled as domestic violence because it was just fighting or conflicts or whatever, not realizing that it was a grooming that even occurred with that because it normalized that kind of conflict.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
so then, and you got to go and then unpack that. Like I've watched my mother and my father fight all these years. So this is not domestic violence. This is just people not getting along or people whatever. And it's like, no, this is it. We have to call a spade a spade. You know,
Amen.
as I say, but it was just a big caveat of things I think that just had to really be unpacked for me. But really for me, it was, I said, okay, I took up the mantle of being an educator for my community. As I tell people, I found out I was HIV positive when I was 20. I started to tell my story at 20 because I didn't see people that looked like me telling their story in order to prevent other people from potentially, ended up with HIV or understanding that they had paths to live or whatever. And then we overcame that, worked through that, whatever. And then it was like, okay, this is now something else that I'm going to have to pick up a mantle for and say, let's go out and let's educate some people and let's let them know that this happens. Because I had friends that, as we talked about it, unpacked it, they said things like, well, he only grabbed me once, or he just raised his hand at one time, or raised his voice. And like you said, that's one too many.
One time is one too many.
Right. And literally, just having a friend that literally at one point realizing now that that he was probably in a very, very bad situation to the point where he ended up on drugs, and sadly he's not with us anymore.
Wow.
And now really having that moment of looking back and saying, God, my friend needed help and I didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens to many female, male. If that support system is not there to rally around them, and they feel like they have no outlet, they turn to drugs. They turn to any and all kind of risky behavior because they feel like they're in this alone. Nobody
And
believes me. Who can I go to?
yeah, and it's sad because I have, as I tell people so often, we judge people very harshly without really knowing fully. Like you said, you look at, like I tell people, you make the assumption that people get high or drink because, oh, they have nothing better to do, or it's about a feeling. I said, no, that's what we call self-medicating.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying to medicate pain.
Exactly.
And the only way that you're ever going to find out and get to the bottom of why they use this substance, whatever it is, it can be, so it's food, it can be a number of things. Like we have a lot of, as you said, that people look at it and they'll say, oh, that's a bad behavior or something, but you will get judged about the behavior. Like it's something that, oh, you're just doing that because you just, want an excuse or whatever. But they are medicating pain, real pain, and things that they deal with. And I see it so often. And yet again, I work in a space where I see this in my clients now,
Right.
and I have to have real conversations with them, not just about, okay, use a condom or get on PrEP or whatever you need to protect yourself. I also now have to have the space of, in your relationship dynamics, what's going on here? What's causing you this level of pain beyond X, Y, or Z? And some of them will share, these things because yet again, they feel like they can't be victimized because yet again, I'm male, or I'm gay. I've even had the same conversation, ironically, with lesbians.
Mm-hmm.
Even to women, people say yet again, well, they want to get into the gender aspect of it, and I said that's not the point. I said anybody can be in a situation where domestic violence.
It definitely happened on this side.
Yeah, that's why I said it does not discriminate. It doesn't. It does
And
not.
for so
Again, and
long,
it's genderless.
it was just, and I always say, when we saw the ads and the commercials, it was, the wonderful people that don't look like us, going through whatever. And yet again, and I mean, because I even had somebody tell me one time, no, that's a white thing. We don't go
Oh,
through domestic violence. What you talking about? And like I told somebody, I said, it's somebody that literally watched my mother and my stepfather literally try to kill each other. And at points, understanding that, yeah, that was all domestic violence, but we label it as other things.
mhm.
I think media plays a big deal in how we view people who go through domestic violence. Because even like listening, you're like, this is a very intellectual male, So I'm like, you have the knowledge, you know what I'm saying, and
Mm-hmm.
all this, and you went through it, like, because normally you see, okay, it's either a male and a female, lower class. If they Caucasian, they in the trailer
Girl
park. You
apart.
know what I'm saying? Or if they black, they in the ghetto. You know what I mean? So so we don't see that it crosses all gender lines, all social classes, all of that. Like it's just what it is. It's abuse that affects everybody,
You
and
know,
we
and the
don't.
other caveat to that is you also did see though also from and people understand when it's the power dynamic, the quote unquote rich man that has the wife that doesn't work or doesn't have her own resources. They could even understand that I think a little bit better. This idea that this powerful man is somehow taking advantage of this woman that is dependent on him because so often yet again you hear the question, well, why did she stay, and I say, now I say, why did they stay? Because it could be male or female. But like I even had to tell people, even with that, the economics played a little bit into our situation. But,
Mm-hmm.
even with me at that point not working, I held my own financially. So it wasn't a thing of financially at one point that I wasn't able to, so quote unquote, do what I need to do to take care of Jeff. It's just this idea that there is such a connection to these people that you feel you literally do it sometimes, as I say, drink the Kool-Aid. You believe that they are your only and they are your whatever, even in everything that they do. And then of course there's always the apologies and there's always the, it'll never happen again. And every time the story becomes more and more convincing.
Yeah. And it also goes back to um I don't want anybody to think a certain type of way about me. I have this image to uphold. So if he or she is beating my brains out, but yet I'm living this lavish life, I want to maintain that image regardless of how bad I'm being hurt or how bad I'm hurting. I still have an image to maintain.
That
So
facade
some
is
are
going to be the death of us. I'm
So
telling you.
some of them hold on to that, not realizing, like you just said, it will someday be the death of you.
No, you're right because like I said earlier, because I went out and I quote unquote was a rebel and I got married to this man and I did this, that was this rebel. I remember even talking to my aunt, and I'm really close to my aunt. Me and my aunt are closer than me and my mom, and even she drank the Kool-Aid to a certain degree because I remember when it finally came out, and because she was just like, okay, I know something happened, and I told her, I said, look, I said one, with everything he told you was a lie. I said two, X, Y, and Z, but I really went through this idea of, okay, this is what happened, this is what happened, and this is what happened. And for her mindset, it was this idea, well, but you made him family. You married him. So almost like, this is on you just as much as it was on him.
Ah, nah.
And it took me a minute because, like I said, meaning that was extremely close to certain
Mhm.
pieces of my family. Like I realized as part of my healing, I actually had to remove myself even from them for a little while I healed, and then came
Right.
back and even had to reconcile some
Sometimes
things.
they come from that old school mindset where you stay with them, you work it out. That's. And so she's not understanding, like, we're not there anymore. We're not doing that. We don't have to do it.
Right, and now that we do have options, and I don't have to stay in a scenario where I'm going to be hurt or whatever. And you're right, like old school says, you married him, you stayed with him. So even now, and I laugh because I was like, this is also parts of my family that didn't condone the marriage, that now on the same note, so you didn't want me to get married, but now you're saying because I did get married, now I have to almost buy into this old dated idea of what you guys think marriage should look like.
Hmm. And that's one of our main problems too with the way society is set up. It's like they tell us, attempt to tell us what marriage should look like or what a relationship should look like, and some of us fall prey to that.
No,
And that's
you have to be able and willing to, like I told people, you have to be willing to be a rebel in these situations. Like you
Mhm.
have to understand that even from the people that care about you legitimately, you're probably going to get some pushback and some things, but you know what's healthy and what's not. And I tell anybody today, I said, I said, let me be very, very clear about something. I said, one of my friends' mom said something to me years ago, and I now take that. She says, never have anyone in your life you're not willing to walk away from as quickly as you walk towards them.
Come on now.
And I've told people that, like, now, like I tell people, it's for me now in relationships, I look at them completely different. I used to look at relationships a lot more cavalier, I used to go into them in a lot more open ways. And now I'm open now, but just in a different kind of way. Like I said, I'm open about my experiences and what I've been through, but also unpacking other people's traumas too, because you listen to some people's stories, and if they, like, my mama and my daddy fought, or my daddy beat my mama, and they've not even dealt with that kind of stuff, then you also have to challenge those kind of people to be like, okay, what are you doing to ensure that you don't repeat this cycle?
Right.
Making sure that they are doing things. Even with friends, I tell them, like, you do realize that's its own form of abuse. And if you are around that, there's something, especially as a kid, that seeps into you, that you have to unpack that. And if you don't have the proper tools to do that, then yeah, you can become an abuser. Or even better said, be abused. I mean, it can work both ways.
Both ways. Yeah. Well, what has your healing journey looked like since leaving that situation? Like, what has your healing journey looked like?
Oh, the healing journey has been wonderful. I have to say that. I, after coming out of something so dark, the biggest thing for me was to understand and realize that, yet again, part of the manipulation and everything, as like I said, his whole thing was always, you will never be without me. And my whole goal in life has been, I'm going to not show him literally, but show everybody that I'm going to be, and I'm going to be that and then some. It's this reclaiming my narrative. It was, you don't get to tell my story. Only I get to tell my story, and unless I give you permission, but retelling my story, retelling the story, reshaping the narrative, challenging the belief systems that help me fall for others, being a light, being a resource, being able to say, when I go through other things, when I know people are going through things or whatever, even beyond work, I have people that, friends that will now say, hey, I have a friend and they're going through something. Do you mind if I give them your number, or will you mind talking to them? And explaining to them, like, seeing where they are, but also, encouraging them to say, hey, get help. There's help out here. Let's find you a therapist. Let's find you, somewhere else to go. But my healing was all about, I laugh because it was all about, I love Auntie Maxine Waters. It was about reclaiming my time.
Come on now.
It was about reclaiming my time, and in that sense, reclaiming my life and the narrative and just everything that went with it. It was about having the uncomfortable conversations. It was about sometimes sitting in emotions that just didn't feel good, but understanding that they needed to move. I have a wonderful therapist now out of New York, and she's an amazing woman. And she really, has challenged me about changing perspective and how that works for your benefit. Just getting out of the idea of being a victim, and not to say that people are not victimized, but in the day, like I said, you don't get to be a victim in this way again. But I think that's the biggest thing, is the reclaiming of the narrative, the reclaiming of the story, the reclaiming of the joy. After coming out of that relationship, it was the first time in my life, and I used to be what I call a serial monogamist. I was always in a relationship in some shape, form. That was the first time in my life I said I didn't want to be in a relationship ever again. And I was like, I'm not going to do it again. This is just too painful and too much, or whatever. But I kept saying to myself yet again, I said, if you do that, he wins.
Amen.
So I challenged myself to go out and find love again, and to make sure I stayed open to that.
Yes.
And to make sure that, yet again, you didn't get to kill that side of me off, because, when we get into spaces of hopelessness and the negativity of it all, it will consume you, and for them, that's part of their victory. It's not just that
Right.
people think that it's just the hitting in the moment or what they do to you in the moment. For a lot of them, it's the knowing that, as they say, they live rent free in your head in some shape, form, or fashion. I've evicted him. You don't live rent free in my head anymore.
Come on now.
And that's funny, ironically, because even still, so like, because this aunt that I talk about, he will still reach out to her every blue moon and say hey and how you doing. And as I told her, y'all had a relationship outside of ours, and I'm not going to interfere in that. But not to tell him anything about me and my life, and I don't want her to ever talk to him again. So if that's now your friend, not mine. Literally, I put on my Mariah Carey hat. I don't know her.
Come
And,
on.
and 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 that's not negative, and that's just you don't get to you don't get to come back into my space
Right.
in any
You don't
shape,
have the
form,
access.
or fashion.
Don't
You
have
don't
the
have
access
access
there.
anymore. Like I told, I don't need to bash your name. I don't need to call your folk or do whatever. It takes more energy to hate than it does to love. And that was the other piece. I think the real power for me was to reconcile for myself, that I had to acknowledge that for myself, that before all of this happened, I loved this person. And that was a hard pill to kind of swallow for a minute.
Right.
How could you have loved this person that was so mean and despicable and all of these things to you? But that's who I am. I went into that in love. And in walking out of it, I was not going to allow him to take that piece away from me, because that's part of the control and part of the manipulation. They want you bitter and beat up and feeling like your life will never be the same. And they go on to live their lives and potentially continue to be the people that they are, and yet again, that's between them and their higher power. But for me, you don't get access. You don't get to steal my joy. Just going out and doing the things that I know that I love, that are fun for me, and laughing again. That was a big part of it. I realized about a year after all this had happened, I didn't laugh as much, and I didn't like that. I said, so I was like, you know what, you hit my joy in that way, and I like to laugh. Me and my friends, we get together and we cut up and we have a good time. But that was
Amen.
parts of me that was so hurt and wounded that I couldn't find that joy anymore. And once I was able to reconnect to that, it was a wonderful, powerful thing for me, because it was like life goes on, you know. Also, in having to acknowledge the fact that myself as a survivor, because so often, some of us will come out of it and we don't like to use that word because it sometimes has some heaviness to it, or it
Right.
makes you feel like a victim on some ways. And and I don't do that. I mean, I gotta tell people I'm a cancer survivor. I've survived a whole lot of things. I survived this too. That's something that I should celebrate.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
being a survivor and being able to say that, but that's where the healing came in for me. Being vocal when people told me not to, because we don't talk about those
We
things.
don't. You don't talk about it
We don't talk about those
because
things.
that don't happen to
That don't
us.
right. That don't happen to us.
That don't happen to us.
That was something else. But just just really going back, and I tell people, get back to your center and who you are. Don't ever allow, because I've talked to people and they say, like I just said, oh, I'm never gonna love again. Nobody will ever love me again. Whatever. And I was like, no. I said, life keeps on life, and if you let it. And go out there and take some time to learn you again. And that was the thing. Like I said, it took me some time. I took a break from dating for like 2 years. But once I got to that space where I'm like, you know what? I'm ready. I've taken this time. I reconnected with myself. Now let's go back out and explore this world again.
So, being that you went through all that you went through, how can or how could have I'm sorry.
You fine?
You said so much, I'm flustered because I'm just like it's a lot. How could we as a community, family, friends, have better supported a person in your situation?
Um,
Because you reached out, you know,
mhm.
and you faced a lot of rejection. So what would you like to have happened? Like, so if we know anybody in that situation, we know exactly what we should be doing versus, just saying, "Oh, you'll get over it," because we know it's like it's a pride thing sometimes. That's why a lot of men don't want to come forward. And you know, what could I do?
I think creating spaces like this, create safe spaces, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I tell people in family, even understanding also if the lift is too hard for you, to be honest with yourself about that, and even the person, because I think for me, some of the expectations that I put on my family, maybe they just weren't able to, or didn't have the capacity to. But for me, it was the idea of the belief piece of it. If someone says they're being abused, believe them. Don't be quick to dismiss it. Don't be quick to go in your own head in your own situations, or even if you know the person, don't be quick to, like you said, people gave me that, but you're intelligent and you're connected and you're this, that can't happen. No, it can't. So, as for the person, but so much even for the community, just understand, create a safe space where people are believed, people are supported. If that's not something that you feel is in your wheelhouse, then maybe figure out other resources where maybe you can direct them. I know Denise is a good resource for that. You guys and what you guys do here. I always tell people, I'm always available to talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
We have to just create support systems. Like I came up on a time when support groups were a real thing. Everything didn't exist in this bubble of the internet. We actually went in rooms and talked to people and talked about
Right.
what we were going through.
Right.
I think a support system or support group for men that is safe, that does not challenge who they are and how they identify as in their manhood, because even in
Right.
that, there's no one way. And I think that's so often like the biggest thing I know I encountered, this idea that your manhood looked one way and that needed to then you had to preserve that, and it wasn't even preserving it for yourself, but preserving it for the community, whether it's the gay community or the Black community or the heterosexual community. Like, don't force somebody to kind of fit into a bubble that just doesn't work. But believe the people when they say what they say. Similar to, like I tell people with sexual assault victims, if a person is willing to open up and share something so tragic, most of the time, 9.9 times out of 10, they're not making this up, because
Making it
to
up.
open yourself up to this is sometimes more scrutiny than it's worth.
Yeah.
So just creating more venues and mechanisms where people feel supported and feel safe. More conversations about it, even just beyond, like we talk about it during maybe domestic violence week or month or day or whatever recognitions
And
that
then
we
that's it.
have, but normalize the conversation. you
Correct.
know um your friends and your family, when something is wrong, don't be afraid to ask. I know one of my issues that I had with my best friend of over 20 plus years was, well, we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know how to, or we didn't want to, like David said, well, we knew he was controlling, but we didn't want to bring that up to you because we thought you would be mad. No, like you have stock in my life. I
Mm-hmm.
trust you, obviously, if you have that position in my life. Sometimes
Right.
we need family and friends to say, hey, something don't look right here, and you might get mad in the moment, but it plants a seed.
Mm-hmm.
It says to them now, and then like I say, who cares about you and who doesn't. So if somebody comes to you, especially a friend, and they know that this is something that's going to be sensitive for you, and they're willing to broker the conversation, and most people, that's enough for them to say, you know what, let me just open up, or let me at least share something of what's going on. But create the space and allow people to share, if you need other resources, don't be afraid to reach out to the people, like the Shy Foundation, or other mechanisms that do have a history of being safe spaces for both men and women. Because as I say, I know that
Amen.
my sisters catch it in a different kind of way, and but the story still sounds the same, and I
There's a
know for
sense.
women it's still difficult
Yeah.
to,
Mm-hmm.
get help and to get out or whatever. And I say, so imagine if it's difficult for a woman, then how difficult it can be then for a man. But just creating space that's safe, that's open. Don't be afraid to have dialogue, and don't be afraid to say, even I don't know. I told my family that all the time. I said, oh, we had conversations instead of y'all saying, I just don't understand. Y'all want to justify it with something else or give me these other whatever. I didn't need all that. I just need you sometimes to be able to say, I hear you, but I just don't get it. And then we can maybe figure out some other ways.
Right.
But we can even put up blocks to where people then don't want to talk or whatever. So if somebody is willing to open up, especially in spaces where men are just not usually able to do that,
Mhm.
allow them that space, to do that.
And even
You
if
know,
they don't even like if your friends would have came to you in that moment and like you said they were afraid they might upset you by bringing it up because they don't know how you would receive it. But even if they
Mhm.
do bring it up and you just plant that seed and let the person know, like, listen, your relationship don't look right to me, but that's just me. You only know what feels right. But if in case it doesn't feel right or it doesn't look good or this person might be a little controlling, I'm here for you. Or if you
Mm-hmm.
want to have that conversation, just leave it open, leave that space for them. And then if they're willing and ready, and when they're ready, they'll come back and talk to you.
no,
Yeah.
but you're right, because as I said that story earlier
Mm-hmm.
about my friend from Savannah, he didn't come at me like, "Oh my God, I know something is wrong in your relationship." He came at me from the understanding of, "I know you, and I know how you are, and something doesn't feel right, but understand, but whatever it is, I'm here."
Yeah, just hold space for your friends and family.
Right? He
And they know
created
they'll use
space
it
for
when
me.
they need it. Yeah,
Right.
they'll use it when they need it.
Um,
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the comments right now. You're very brave to share your story. We
very
definitely
brave.
do
No,
appreciate this.
I thank you guys for the invitation. It was
Yeah.
funny. I heard Denise was looking for me, and I was like, let me find out what
Oh,
Denise
we
wants.
was we was
Um,
looking. I said call them up right now.
I said Denise was looking for me, so let me find out what Denise wants. But in this situation, and I tell people, like when we did this, I know a while back in person, and that was, it can be jarring and it's hard. I tell
Mm-hmm.
people like I've learned to articulate it or whatever, but it exposes you in ways that can be very, very uncomfortable. But as I tell people, I also understand that I at least have the tools
Right.
to be able
Right.
to do that. So I'm willing to share what I need to share, because I now know how to fully take care of me on the back end to ensure that I'm hoping that in me sharing my goal is always that it will help somebody.
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean,
You
sharing
know.
is not easy, and it can open up wounds a little bit. But keep doing the work. Keep doing the
Oh yeah,
work.
Yeah.
no. I tell people that,
So,
like,
uh,
it's silence is when we get into the space of silence where things get dangerous.
Yes.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and I tell people, as long as you can articulate something, then there's hope. You put
Mhm.
voice to power, it changes things, and I believe that. So
What message of hope do you want to leave for our listeners today?
mm. Message of hope. It gets better. it,
Mm-hmm.
it, it really does. Sometimes you are in these dark spaces, and I literally, and I share this now. I was in such a dark space, and physically just going through so much, even down to the point where it impacted my health. And I felt like if I hadn't had that light, then I might not be here talking to you guys.
Oh.
But something said to me enough, this it gets better. This it is not the end. It's any day that you have breath, any day that you can get up and even think about maybe what's going on or even acknowledge it. That's a move towards the right step. But just it gets better, but you definitely have to get up at some points and say, you know, just keep pushing through.
Mm-hmm.
Keep pushing through. And also to just remember that there are people that care.
Amen.
And I think that was for me the most powerful thing, because even though, like I said, at the time I didn't have family near me or whatever, like I said, I had this therapist who literally gave me her home phone number and was like, call me anytime. And this woman literally
Wow.
almost brought me into her house. It got so crazy. She was just like, although unethical in a lot of ways for my therapist to do that, she was willing to say, hey, just get beyond that. If it just needs you need a safe place to lay
She
your head for a
she was
night, I'm
in
here.
she was in saving life mode.
Right. She wasn't
Right.
concerned about ethics and all that
Right.
stuff. But no, like I tell people, just remember that it sounds cliche, but it gets better. But just understand that you get up and connect yourself with the resources. And if you don't know what to find, where to find them, reach out to someone like, Denise of the Shy Foundation, and we can figure things out. And we can always, like I tell people, this has become an underground network kind of movement. So it ain't even about maybe what's published and what's out there, but it's about, hey, I can call somebody that I know that calls somebody,
Right.
and we can
Exactly.
sometimes make things move. So yeah,
Right.
just just keep living, and just remember that it
Yeah.
gets better. Just remember who you are at the end of
Yeah.
the day,
And
because you
and
are
I
not.
say to a couple of men that I dealt with, I just say to them, don't be a man about it. Like, don't be a man about it. Because if you subject yourself to anything, or you would say anything just to live a quiet life, you're bringing more harm to yourself. So say something, do something so you can live a better life.
Right.
We don't want to live a quiet life. We want to live a better life. So do
you know
something. Say
and
something. It's
even like with
okay.
men, and I will say this too, like also with that is that your tears are healing.
Mm-hmm.
So often we are told as men we not supposed to cry, we
Mm.
shouldn't cry. um a lot of times I had to get a good cry in just to clear out some things,
Yes.
and it allowed me to then focus. But holding all that stuff in, it'll always feel like I don't know which way to go or whatever. Like, have your moment, have a release, and it's okay.
And it
It does
is
not.
okay because 12 years in with Shy, and I still cry. I still have those moments. I still have those days. And sometimes I cry, cry, cry. And then when I finish crying, I'm okay.
Yeah, no,
I'm
tears are
okay.
powerful. They are healing. I always say, old school, as they say, everything needs a little water to grow. And
Come
I
on.
always add on that, you need some fertilizer too, which ain't nothing but shit. So however you
It's
throw it, it's all for your good and all for your growth. And
all
even
for your
though
good.
it's all for you good, and I know in the moment, yet again, it doesn't feel that way. But yeah, just you know, remember there's hope, and also remember who you are, because I think that's the biggest thing that abuse is stripped from us is your identity,
Yeah.
because you can't have an identity outside of them. So they have to strip that. So once you reclaim that, it takes away the power.
You better say it.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much. I wish I could have spoke more, but I was over here coughing and hacking. But I want to
No,
thank
no,
you
you
so
fine.
much for being so courageous and sharing your story with us today. Your honesty, oh, it spoke volumes. I just pray that your message gets to the people it needs to get to, and inspire others to step forward and speak out. This definitely opened our eyes to the fact that domestic violence does not discriminate based upon gender. Your story reminds us that, hey, despite what you're going through, you can always put it back together.
Put it back
Um,
together, man.
yeah,
You are amazing, Jeffrey.
you are.
Thank
You
you,
You
thank
are
you.
are.
And I'll
amazing.
say, just know to you guys, if you ever need a resource,
You
if you
are
need someone
amazing.
to talk to someone, please feel free
Oh,
to reach
we're
out.
keeping you in the Rolodex. Y'all remember what Rolodex?
Yeah,
We're gonna keep you in there. Because definitely we need to address that portion of demographics because it's very underserved when it comes to the males. But like Jeffrey said, if you need any resources, reach out to the domestic violence hotline. They can support you. That number is 1-800-799-SAFE. 1-800-799-SAFE. Or you can reach out to the Shy Foundation as well, and we'll try to get you in touch with the resources and help you through your situation. Please remember that love shouldn't hurt, regardless of what gender you are, how you identify, regardless,
exactly.
it should not hurt. Um, and we're just going to be here to help you guys along the way if you allow us to. But once again, thank you for joining us on this
Thank you,
sharing
Jeffrey, so
inspiration
very much.
Thank you guys
podcast.
again for
Thank you to
I
having
will be in touch.
absolutely.
me.
Thank you to our listening audience at home. You guys were tuned in, and I
Thank
hope
you,
you guys
guys.
learned a whole lot from Jeffrey. He's very intellectual little guy. So I mean, I just want
Yes,
to eat your
three,
brain
two,
because when
one.
you were telling me all the stuff you're doing, I was like, this man does a lot.
A lot.
He does a
Yeah,
lot.
he does a lot.
Oh
But
my!
and I say this in closing, the one thing that for me the reason why I do so much is that coming from an environment where you were told so often what you couldn't be and what you couldn't
Mm,
have, I understood that there was a power in just going out and learning and engaging and also and then being able to give that back. That's always my thing. Like share what you learn, share what you
yes,
learn.
God. Y'all get it? Share what you learn.
Share what you learn.
Sure.
You're just a little rebel because every time somebody tell you what you ain't gonna do, or you you flip it on them. I love it.
I
I love
do.
it.
Look. I tell people I'm quite antagonistic when I want to be.
All right, man.
All right, guys. It's been a great episode. I hope you guys tune in next Wednesday. Denise, do you have any special announcements?
Special announcement. Christmas Gala, December 14th, guys. Don't forget. We only have 3 tables. 3 tables remaining. $100. Seat 10 people. We have 3 booths remaining. Tickets go on sale September 7th. We will be doing a community feed and also September the 13th. But again, Christmas Gala is approaching. Get your tables, get your booth, come out, be a part. This is a night of the stars, guys.
And
We're gonna
I
be
forgot about
shining.
I
We're
forgot
gonna
about
be
my little buddy. My little buddy. I ain't gonna forget about you.
hello,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and Love Jones, one of our biggest supporters, doing a dinner brunch on Sunday at the Grown and Sexy Tavern. Please come out and be a part. Love Jones is the dude.
You got any announcements, Jeffrey? Before we leave?
No, just look us up at A Vision for Hope. We are in the process of getting ready for the AIDS Walk, which is coming up
And y'all better be out there supporting
September
us.
27th. Please go to our website. And if you can support the organization financially, this is our biggest fundraiser of the year. And as everybody knows, during the current political climate, we have lost some funding because of just some
Mm,
discriminatory practices that have been going on. I'm
hello.
keeping this politically correct, but no, but your local nonprofits need you. And as A Vision for Hope, and being your director of programs, and I can speak for our ED Dwayne when I say that we need you to support us because this only allows us to do the work that we do, including some of what we talked about here at A Vision for Hope. This is we're not just HIV and AIDS. We do it all. We house individuals.
Do it all.
Y'all do it all.
They do it
We
all.
do it all, and it's
Support
only through
everybody.
community support. Yes, it's only
Yes.
through community support that we are able to, because there are organizations. We had an organization on Friday shut their doors that was serving our community, which is not good. So
Yeah.
we need you guys support. So if you go to a vision, the number 4, the word hope.org, the information is on our website.
Support, guys. A Vision
Support.
for Hope.
Because they support
Support.
everybody.
AIDS Walk, September the 27th.
Mm-hmm. And
Come
we
Now,
need
on,
you guys in the
support.
park. And also, if you register, which right now there's a code you can register. Registration is normally $25. It's now $15 off. But you get a free concert, and this year it's CeeLo. So
Now I ain't gonna walk, but I'll come to the park now.
And that's what we tell people. You
Okay.
ain't got, you don't have to
because
walk.
it's hot
You just-
outside.
And no, but literally, we want to create a presence in the park. We are trying to get for everybody, but specifically, I need 100 people to come and rep a vision for hope in the park.
Okay.
You don't have to walk. You don't just
We
register
We coming.
and come.
We coming.
And you get a free. You get to see with the CeeLo and trombone shorty. If people know who he is,
Yeah.
he's a big
We coming.
jazz musician. But please come out and support us, and it's a good time.
We'll be there.
It's a
We're
good
gonna
time.
be there. I'm be there with my fan. I ain't gonna walk. Don't ask me to walk now.
Look, I don't even walk anymore. I did that for the team. I man the table.
Long as you know I ain't
take one
walking.
for the team and be at the table, Jim.
Well, I'll sit
man
at the
the
table
table.
because I don't like to sweat. I get chafe.
Right. No. So look, we let them walk, but we come back. Last year we had Lil Kim. It was real fun. This year CeeLo, and it's just a good time.
All right. We're going to get out there with you. All right. With that being said, thank you so much again.
Thank you,
See y'all guys next Wednesday.
You
Bye.
guys.
Thank you, Jim. Bye.